At 37 years old, Reggie earned a respectable $98,000 a year as a rail operations manager for the Chicago Transit Authority. It was a job of immense complexity and zero glamour, a life spent in the fluorescent hum of control rooms and the metallic clang of the Garfield Park rail yard. His world was one of timetables, switching systems, and the relentless logic of moving thousands of people across the city safely and on time. He lived in a handsome brick two-flat in Kenwood that he'd bought for $450,000 6 years ago, long before he met his wife, Kalia. The house, like his pension, was his. And on a rainy Friday evening at 7 p.m., as he was packing for their long-awaited anniversary trip to Tulum, he was about to find out just how important that fact was. The devastating situation unfolded not with a bang, but with the click of a bedroom door and a voice as sharp and cold as the November wind whipping off Lake Michigan. "You need to cancel the trip." Reggie didn't look up. He was in the middle of folding a brand new $80 Tommy Bahama swim trunk, its vibrant floral pattern a stark contrast to the gray Chicago sky outside. He placed it neatly inside his side of the large, $350 Samsonite spinner suitcase that sat open on their king-sized bed. The trip was a meticulously planned $7,000 all-inclusive package to the Hyatt Ziva Riviera Cancun, a 5-star anniversary gift to themselves, or so he thought. "Cancel Tulum?" he asked, his voice even. He finally looked at her. Kalia stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She was wearing a new silk blouse that he knew, without asking, had cost at least $400. Her expression was not one of apology or negotiation. It was a demand. "Jovan's coming into town this weekend," she said, the name dropping into the quiet room like a stone. Jovan, her ex-boyfriend, the free-spirited, perpetually struggling artist she spoke of with a frustrating mixture of pity and admiration. "His gallery showing in New York got moved up, and he has a layover. He wants to see me." Reggie's hands, which could deftly manage the controls of a multi-ton train system during a blizzard, felt strangely heavy. He looked from her defiant face to the suitcase, to the 2 plane tickets tucked into the front pocket of his carry-on. "Kalia, our flight is at 10:30 tomorrow morning. The trip is paid for. It's our anniversary." "And this is important to me," she countered, her voice rising. "It's a last-minute thing. He needs a place to stay. You can call the airline. Get a credit. We can go to Mexico another time." He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, a feeling he hadn't had since a power failure once trapped 3 trains in the State Street subway. It was the feeling of a system breaking down, of established rules being flagrantly ignored. "Another time? Our anniversary is on Sunday. That was the whole point." She sighed, a dramatic, put-upon sound that grated on his nerves. "Reggie, don't be so rigid. It's just a vacation. This is my friend. A friend who needs me." He thought about the word friend. He thought about the late-night texts she would quickly hide. He thought about the way her voice changed when she said Jovan's name. He had spent his career mastering intricate systems, but the emotional logic of his own marriage remained a baffling, chaotic mess. He had tried to believe it was just friendship, a relic of a past life. But this was different. This was a deliberate choice, a public declaration of priorities. "So you want me to cancel our $7,000 anniversary trip? A trip we've been planning for 6 months so your ex-boyfriend can crash at our house?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Kalia took a step into the room. She saw his stillness not as a sign of coiled anger, but as a prelude to surrender. She had always seen his calm, methodical nature as weakness, a lack of passion. She had underestimated him for the entirety of their 3-year marriage. It was a mistake that was about to cost her everything. "Yes," she said, her tone hardening into its final, unbreakable form. "That's what I want. And if you can't do that for me, if you're going to be this selfish, then I'll be calling my lawyer on Monday morning to file. It's that simple. Cancel the trip, or we're getting a divorce." Have you ever been faced with a choice so clear it felt like the world was holding its breath? That's the moment Reggie found himself in. And what he did next changed everything. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to make a stand for your own dignity. The silence that followed her ultimatum was absolute. The only sound was the faint hiss of rain against the window pane of their master bedroom. In that silence, Reggie's world didn't shatter. It clarified. It was as if a thick fog had finally lifted, revealing the stark, undeniable truth of his marriage. He wasn't a partner. He was a provider. He wasn't a husband. He was a highly compensated convenience. His mind, trained for logical progression, began to catalog the evidence. This wasn't a sudden storm. It was the hurricane that had been building just over the horizon for years. He thought back to their first anniversary. He had made reservations at Alinea, a 3 Michelin star experience that cost a staggering $1,800 for two and required booking 3 months in advance. He'd been so excited, wearing a new $900 Zegna suit he'd bought for the occasion. An hour before they were supposed to leave, Kalia had called. "Babe, something came up," she'd said, her voice breezy over the phone. "Cynthia is having a total meltdown over her breakup. We're at the aviary getting cocktails. I can't just leave her." Kalia, the reservation, they charged the full amount for a no-show. "Oh, don't be so worried about the money, Reggie. It's just money. My friend needs me." He ate the $1,800 cancellation fee and a cold sandwich from his own refrigerator that night. She came home after 2 a.m., smelling of gin and expensive perfume, and fell asleep without another word about it. He had told himself it was a one-time thing, that she was just being a good friend. He had no idea how wrong he was. Then there was the matter of his job. He was proud of what he did. Managing the CTA's green and pink lines was a monumental responsibility. His $98,000 salary was the bedrock of their life, the silent engine that powered her expensive tastes. Yet, she spoke of his career with a thinly veiled contempt, especially in front of her friends. He remembered a dinner party at their house about a year ago. They were hosting 2 other couples, friends of hers from her days working at a boutique PR firm. One of the husbands, a finance guy named Marcus, was talking about a multi-million-dollar deal he'd just closed. Kalia had beamed at him, her eyes wide with admiration. Later, Marcus's wife, a kind woman named Simone, had turned to Reggie. "It must be so stressful, your job, keeping the whole city moving." Before he could answer, Kalia laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Oh, Reggie just plays with his train set all day. It's not exactly high finance, is it?" The table went quiet for a beat too long. Reggie had felt a hot flush of shame crawl up his neck. He'd looked at his wife, who was already turning back to Marcus, completely oblivious to the wound she'd just inflicted. He saw the price tag of her dress that night, a shimmering $2,400 Burberry number, and realized with a sickening lurch that his train set had paid for it. His stable, predictable, boring job funded the very lifestyle from which she looked down on him. And always in the background there was Jovan, the painter who lived in a warehouse loft in Pilsen and was always on the verge of a major breakthrough. Jovan, who drove a beat-up 2005 Subaru Forester with 200,000 miles on it, but spoke about authenticity and living for one's art. Kalia contributed to his GoFundMe campaigns. She bought his canvases, amateurish splashes of color that she insisted were genius, for $500 or $1,000 apiece, hanging them in the hallways of Reggie's house. "He just sees the world differently," she would say, a dreamy look in her eyes. "He's not trapped by a 9 to 5. He's free." Reggie, a man who found freedom in structure, in dependability, in the profound satisfaction of a system working perfectly, could never understand what she meant. He only saw a man in his late 30s who couldn't pay his own rent, a man who represented the opposite of everything Reggie had worked so hard to build. The stability Kalia claimed to find stifling was the very thing that allowed her the luxury of admiring Jovan's instability from a safe, financially secure distance. She loved the idea of the starving artist, but only because she was guaranteed a full meal at Reggie's table every night. She'd even pushed for them to buy a new car for her 2 years ago. Reggie's 2018 Honda Accord, which he'd paid for with $24,000 of his own savings, was uninspired. She wanted an Audi Q5, a sleek white SUV that came with a $68,000 price tag. "We can afford it," she'd argued, spreading the dealership pamphlets on their $3,000 restoration hardware dining table. "We can afford it because I make nearly $100,000 a year," he had countered, more sharply than he'd intended. "And my pension contributions are non-negotiable." "Don't throw your salary in my face," she'd snapped. "It's so crass." They'd gotten the car. The loan was in her name to build her credit, she'd insisted. But the hefty $950 monthly payment was auto-debited from their joint checking account, an account into which he deposited $5,000 a month, and she deposited nothing. She'd quit her PR job shortly after they married, declaring she wanted to find her passion. It seemed her primary passion was spending his income. There was the $4,000 a month that vanished on lunches at Italy, shopping sprees on Michigan Avenue, and nights out with her friends. There were the subscriptions to services he'd never heard of, the Equinox gym membership for $250 a month that she used twice, the constant deliveries from Net-a-Porter and Saks. All of these moments, these thousands of tiny cuts, coalesced in the space of that one silent minute in their bedroom. Her ultimatum wasn't a spontaneous act of frustration. It was the logical conclusion of a long-held belief that her desires superseded their commitments, that his feelings were secondary, and that his resources were hers to command. The trip to Tulum was not just a vacation. It was a symbol of his effort, his planning, his desire to connect, and she was asking him to burn it to the ground to roast marshmallows with a ghost from her past. He looked at her standing there, so sure of her power, so confident in his compliance. And for the first time, he didn't see the woman he had once loved. He saw a stranger, a beautifully dressed, incredibly expensive stranger standing in his house, telling him to set himself on fire to keep her warm. The cold dread in his stomach was gone. In its place was a profound, almost serene, stillness. He was a man of systems, and when a system is fundamentally broken, you don't patch it, you shut it down. The ultimatum hung in the air, thick and toxic. Cancel the trip, or I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Reggie's gaze dropped from Kalia's face back to the open suitcase on the bed. He saw the neatly folded swim trunks, the crisp linen shirts, the bottle of $30 Supergoop sunscreen. He saw the physical manifestation of months of planning, of looking forward to something that was supposed to be theirs. Then he did something Kalia didn't expect. He did nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He didn't argue. He simply walked around the bed to his dresser, a solid oak piece he'd inherited from his grandfather. He opened a drawer and took out 3 pairs of socks, rolling them into tight, perfect cylinders, just as he had been taught in his brief stint in the Army Reserves years ago. He placed them in a small compartment of the Samsonite. Kalia watched him, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. His silence was a variable she hadn't accounted for. She had expected a fight, a dramatic confrontation that would end with her tearful, victorious forgiveness after he capitulated. This quiet, methodical continuation of his task was unnerving. "Reggie, did you hear me?" she pressed, her voice losing a fraction of its sharp edge. "I heard you," he said, his back still to her. He opened another drawer and pulled out a stack of T-shirts. He selected two, a plain gray one from a $50 three-pack by Mack Weldon and a black one with a subtle CTA logo on the sleeve, a gift from his team. He folded them with practiced precision and laid them next to the linen shirts. This was the moment. This was the scene where he was supposed to be playing dumb, feigning compliance while his mind raced. But for Reggie, it wasn't an act. It was a retreat into the one thing that had never failed him: process. He was no longer packing for a vacation with his wife. He was executing a logistical maneuver. The objective had changed, but the steps remained the same. Gather supplies, secure transport, reach destination. Kalia, however, saw what she wanted to see. She interpreted his calm packing as a sign that he was caving, that he was simply going through the motions before making the requisite phone calls to cancel everything. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She had won. Again. "Good," she said, her voice softening into a tone of magnanimous condescension. "I knew you'd be reasonable. I'll go call Jovan and let him know it's all set. He can take the guest room. And don't worry. We'll use the airline credit for a trip to Napa in the spring. It'll be even better." She walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm. His muscles were rigid beneath his shirt. "Thank you, baby. This really means a lot to me." Reggie said nothing. He simply picked up his DOP kit from the dresser. Inside was a $45 Kiehl's facial cleanser, a $28 Jack Black moisturizer, his toothbrush, and the $150 Philips electric razor he used to keep the edges of his short, neat locks perfectly groomed. He zipped the kit, its contents a small, portable summary of his daily routine, and placed it carefully in the suitcase. He was not just packing for a trip. He was packing his life, separating it from hers piece by piece. He moved from the bedroom to his home office, a small room overlooking the backyard garden that he tended to with meticulous care. Kalia followed him, chattering on her phone, presumably to Jovan. "Yes, it's fine now. No, he just needed a minute to process. Of course you can stay here, don't be silly. I can't wait to see you." Reggie ignored her. He opened the drawer of his desk, a sturdy $800 piece from Crate and Barrel. He took out his passport, his spare wallet containing his emergency credit cards and $500 in cash, and the folder containing the deed to his house and a copy of their prenuptial agreement. He slipped the folder into the main compartment of his leather laptop bag, a $400 Toomey briefcase he'd bought himself to celebrate his last promotion. He then unplugged his $1,200 MacBook Air and slid it into its padded sleeve. Every object he touched had a story, a price tag, a connection to a life he had built through diligence and hard work. The house, purchased with a $90,000 down payment he had saved over a decade. The pension, a silent testament to 15 years of early mornings and late nights. The very air in the room seemed to vibrate with the quiet power of his self-sufficiency, and Kalia, laughing on the phone with her ex, was utterly blind to it. She ended her call as he was zipping the briefcase shut. "All set," she said brightly. "He's landing at Midway tomorrow around noon. We can go pick him up in the Audi." "We." The word struck him as absurd. There was no "we" anymore. There was him, and there was her. Two separate entities with irreconcilable goals. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time since she'd issued her ultimatum. He saw the expensive blouse, the perfectly styled hair, the confident smile of a woman who believed she held all the cards. She was beautiful, but it was the cold, hard beauty of a diamond, a beauty he now realized was entirely transactional. In his mind, a different kind of calculation was taking place. It wasn't emotional, it was tactical. He was a strategist. He managed the flow of a major city artery. He understood contingency plans. Years ago, when he and Kalia had decided to get married, his sister, a sharp-witted paralegal, had insisted he get a prenup. "Reggie, I love you, but you're a planner," she'd said. "You have a pension, you have a house. Kalia has a lot of expensive shoes. Plan for the worst, hope for the best." He had felt guilty at the time, but he had listened. They had gone to a top-tier law firm in the Loop. He remembered the heavy wood-paneled office, the view of Millennium Park, the senior partner, a man who billed at $1,500 an hour, explaining the terms. The document was an ironclad fortress. It explicitly designated the Kenwood house as his sole and separate property. It shielded his entire CTA pension, which after 15 years of service was already valued at over $400,000 and projected to be worth more than $1.5 million by his retirement. It included a mutual waiver of spousal support, acknowledging that Kalia was young, healthy, and had a resume from her PR career. Her own lawyer, a $900 an hour shark from a competing firm, had reviewed it and advised her to sign. She had, with a casual flick of her pen, as if it were a mere formality. She had never truly believed it would ever apply to her. She had never imagined a scenario where he would actually leave. He also remembered a specific choice he'd made when booking the Tulum trip. The travel agent had offered a standard package and a flexible package for an extra $500. The flexible option made the booking non-transferable but fully usable by either of the named travelers, and it allowed for date changes with a minimal fee. Out of a lifelong habit of building in redundancies, a habit honed by years of dealing with track fires and signal malfunctions, he had paid the extra $500. The trip was in his name. It was his to take, with or without her. "Reggie?" Kalia prompted, her smile faltering slightly at his prolonged silence. "Are you going to make the calls now? To the airline and the hotel?" Reggie looked at his watch. It was 8:47 p.m. "No," he said, his voice flat and calm. "I'm not." He picked up his laptop bag and walked back into the bedroom. Kalia followed, the first seeds of real panic beginning to sprout in her chest. "What do you mean you're not? We agreed." He didn't answer. He simply placed the laptop bag next to the front door. He returned to the bedroom and zipped the Samsonite suitcase closed. The sound was definitive, a sharp, final punctuation mark on their 3 years of marriage. He lifted the 40-pound suitcase off the bed and wheeled it out into the hallway. He walked to the entryway closet and took out his all-weather jacket, a practical $250 North Face shell. He put it on. He picked up his car keys from the small bowl on the $250 crate and barrel entryway table, where they always kept them. Kalia stood in the archway between the living room and the hall, her arms wrapped around herself. The confident, triumphant posture was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. Her face, which had been alight with victory moments before, was now pale with confusion. "Reggie, what are you doing?" Her voice was a thin whisper. "Where are you going with that suitcase?" He turned to face her, his hand on the doorknob. The rain lashed against the door, a fitting soundtrack for the storm that had finally broken inside his house. "You gave me a choice," he said, his voice devoid of anger or malice. It was the voice he used in the control room when announcing a critical system change, calm, clear, and absolute. "You said cancel the trip or you file for divorce on Monday. You told me to choose." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between them. "I'm going to the airport." He opened the door and, without a backward glance, stepped out into the cold, rainy Chicago night. leaving her standing alone in the beautiful house his money had furnished and his name had secured. He had made his choice. The drive to O'Hare International Airport was a blur of slick asphalt and the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers on his 2018 Honda Accord. The city lights smeared across the wet glass, transforming the familiar Chicago skyline into an abstract painting of neon and shadow. Reggie drove with a steady hand, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. The man driving this car, heading to the airport with a suitcase full of summer clothes in the middle of a November downpour, felt both like himself and like a complete stranger. He didn't feel anger, not yet. The emotion was too hot, too chaotic. What he felt was a profound, chilling clarity. It was the same feeling he got in the moments before a major service change at the CTA, a complex, multi-layered operation where one wrong move could cause cascading failures across the entire system. His marriage had been a cascading failure for years, and he had just pulled the emergency brake. He pulled into the economy parking lot, Lot G, the one he always used. The fee was $15 a day, a practical choice. He found a spot, killed the engine, and sat for a long moment in the sudden silence. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He knew it was Kalia. He ignored it. He got out of the car, the cold rain instantly soaking his hair. He retrieved his $350 Samsonite from the trunk, its wheels cutting silently through the puddles as he walked toward the shuttle bus stop. The airport was a river of humanity, a brightly lit ecosystem of hellos and goodbyes. Reggie moved through it like a ghost. He checked his bag at the United counter, the agent barely glancing at him as she tagged it for Cancun. He moved through the TSA security line with practiced efficiency, placing his laptop in one bin, his shoes and jacket in another. He didn't feel like a man whose life had just imploded. He felt like a man catching a flight. As he walked toward his gate in Terminal 1, his phone buzzed again, and then again. A string of texts. He resisted the urge to look. He knew what they would say. Confusion, anger, accusations. He found his gate C21 and sat down in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. He looked out the massive window at the tarmac, where ground crews in yellow vests scurried around a Boeing 737. The same model he would soon be boarding. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the plane gleamed under the powerful floodlights. It was a machine built for escape. The boarding call came at 9:55 p.m. He joined the line for Group 3, found his seat, 14A, a window seat he'd paid an extra $49 for. He stowed his Toomey briefcase in the overhead bin and settled in. The plane filled up around him. Couples holding hands, families with excited children, solo travelers like himself. He wondered what their stories were. Were they running to something or away from something? The flight was uneventful. He put on his $200 Bose noise-canceling headphones, listened to a podcast about urban planning, and dozed off somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico. When he woke up, the flight attendant was announcing their initial descent into Cancun. He looked out the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink. Below, peeking through the clouds, was the most impossibly turquoise water he had ever seen. Clearing customs and immigration was a breeze. He stepped out of the air-conditioned airport and was hit by a wall of warm, humid air. It felt like stepping into a different world. The scent of salt and tropical flowers replaced the metallic tang of the L train. He found the shuttle bus for the Hyatt Ziva, a luxury van with leather seats and a smiling driver who offered him a cold bottle of water. The 20-minute drive to the resort was a sensory overload. The vibrant green of the jungle, the colorful roadside stalls, the sheer, unapologetic brightness of it all. The resort itself was breathtaking, an oasis of white buildings, infinity pools, and perfectly manicured gardens set against the backdrop of the Caribbean Sea. He checked in, the concierge treating him with the same polite deference as the couples checking in beside him. He was not a heartbroken man fleeing a failed marriage. He was simply a guest in room 3412, an oceanfront king with a private balcony, a room that was supposed to have been the romantic backdrop for his anniversary. He tipped the bellman $20 and closed the door to his room. The silence was absolute. He walked onto the balcony. The view was a postcard: white sand, swaying palm trees, and that water, a dazzling gradient of blue from pale turquoise to deep sapphire. He could hear the gentle crash of the waves and the distant laughter of people enjoying their vacations. He unpacked his suitcase, hanging the linen shirts in the closet, placing his swim trunks in a drawer. He changed into the $80 Tommy Bahama trunks and a simple t-shirt. He walked down to the beach, the fine white sand cool beneath his feet. He found a beach bar, a thatched roof hut called Habaneros, and ordered a margarita. It cost $15 and was made with top-shelf tequila. He sat at a small table, watching the waves roll in. He felt the accumulated tension of the last 24 hours and the last 3 years begin to dissolve under the warmth of the Mexican sun. He was alone, but he did not feel lonely. He felt free. He felt a quiet, powerful sense of rightness. He had chosen his own peace over her manufactured chaos. He spent the next few hours just sitting there, sipping his drink, watching the world go by. He saw couples walking hand in hand, their faces full of the easy happiness he had once craved. He felt a pang of sadness, not for the loss of Kalia, but for the loss of the dream he had once had for them. It was a clean, sharp grief, like a surgeon's cut, a necessary pain on the path to healing. Around 4 p.m., he decided to go for a swim. He left his things at the table and waded into the warm, clear water. It felt like a baptism. He floated on his back, looking up at the vast blue sky, and felt a single tear escape his eye and mix with the salt of the sea. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. He walked back out of the water, his deep brown skin glistening in the afternoon sun. He felt a sense of purpose. He picked up his phone from the table. There were 17 missed calls and 32 text messages from Kalia. He didn't read them. He opened his camera instead. He saw a friendly-looking tourist nearby, a man in his 50s with a kind face. "Excuse me," Reggie said. "Would you mind taking a quick photo of me?" The man smiled. "Not at all." Reggie handed him his phone and walked back toward the water's edge. He stood with the stunning Caribbean panorama behind him. He didn't pose. He just stood there, looking calm, relaxed, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. He was not a man performing happiness. He was a man who was, in that moment, truly at peace. The tourist took a few shots and handed the phone back. "Looks great. You picked a perfect day for it." "Thank you," Reggie said. "I think so too." He looked at the picture. It was perfect. The lighting, the color, the quiet confidence in his own expression. It said everything he needed to say. He opened his messaging app, selected Kalia's contact, and attached the photo. He typed no words, no explanation, no taunt. The image itself was the message. He checked the time on his phone. It was Saturday. 4:14 p.m. in Chicago. He hit send. The strike was complete. The message delivered instantly. A small blue check mark appeared beneath the photo of him on the sun-drenched Tulum beach. For a moment, Reggie felt a flicker of something, anticipation, maybe even a trace of vindictive satisfaction. But it passed as quickly as it came, replaced by the serene emptiness of the ocean in front of him. He had launched the missile. He had no interest in watching the explosion. He put his phone on silent, tucked it into his beach bag, and went for a long walk down the shore. But in the Kenwood house 1,600 miles away, the explosion was deafening. Kalia was sitting on their $4,000 Roche-Beaubois sofa, her phone clutched in her hand. Jovan was supposed to have landed an hour ago, but she hadn't gone to get him. She'd been frantically calling and texting Reggie since he'd walked out the night before, her messages cycling through confusion, anger, and a dawning, sickening panic. The arrival of the photo was like a silent thunderclap. She stared at the image. Reggie. On a beach. A beautiful, tropical beach. He was smiling. Not a big, fake smile, but a small, contented one she hadn't seen on his face in years. The background was painfully idyllic. White sand, turquoise water, a sky so blue it hurt to look at. He was there. He had actually gone. Without her. The phone rang in her hand. It was Jovan. She ignored it. Her world, which had seemed so firmly under her control just yesterday, was tilting on its axis. The sheer audacity of his action was incomprehensible. Reggie, her stable, predictable, boring Reggie, had done the most unpredictable thing imaginable. He had called her bluff. Her thumbs flew across the screen. 4:15 p.m., text. Is this a joke? No reply. 4:17 p.m., text. Reggie, call me right now. Where are you? You think this is funny? Silence. 4:20 p.m., text. You left me. You actually left me for a vacation. The absurdity of her own words hung in the digital air. She stared at them, a wave of cold fury washing over her. She switched from texting to calling. It went straight to voicemail. She left a message, her voice tight and shaking with rage. 4:25 p.m. Voicemail. Reginald, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is the most childish, pathetic stunt you have ever pulled. You are humiliating me. Jovan is here. What am I supposed to tell him? You get on the next flight home, do you hear me? The next flight. We will sort this out. And you will apologize. She hung up, her chest heaving. She paced the living room, the plush fibers of the $8,000 Persian rug doing nothing to soothe her. She looked around the room, at the art on the walls, including two of Jovan's masterpieces that Reggie's salary had paid for, the designer furniture, the view of the quiet tree-lined street. This was her life. He couldn't just walk away from it. He couldn't just turn it off. An hour passed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows into the room. Jovan had called 3 more times, then sent a text. Hey, landed. Everything okay? Where are you? Kalia's fury began to curdle into a raw, unfamiliar fear. The foundation of her world was not the Roche-Beaubois sofa or the Audi in the garage. It was Reggie's unwavering predictability. It was his $98,000 salary, his quiet competence, his willingness to absorb her whims and complaints. And that foundation was now gone. She tried to call him again. Voicemail. She left another message, her tone shifting from anger to a desperate, manipulative plea. 5:30 p.m. Voicemail. Okay, baby, look, I'm sorry. I was stressed. Jovan it was bad timing. I didn't mean it like that. You know I didn't. Please just call me. I'm worried about you. Just let me know you're safe. She spent the rest of the evening in a state of suspended animation, jumping every time her phone made a sound. It was never him. It was Jovan, asking what was going on. It was her friend Cynthia, asking if she was excited for Tulum. She lied, telling Cynthia the trip was postponed due to a work emergency for Reggie. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Sunday, their actual anniversary, was the worst. The house felt cavernously empty. The silence was an accusation. She thought about Reggie, alone in that 5-star resort, in the room meant for them. The image of his small, peaceful smile burned in her mind. She realized with a jolt that she wasn't just angry. She was jealous. He had found a peace that had nothing to do with her. Her fear solidified back into anger, a last-ditch effort to regain control. She sent one final threatening text. Sunday morning text. I meant what I said. I'm at the lawyer's office Monday morning if I don't hear from you. I'm not bluffing. Meanwhile, in Tulum, Reggie was having the best anniversary of his life. He woke up early, had breakfast overlooking the ocean, and read a book by the pool. He had turned his phone off and locked it in the room's safe. He went on a guided snorkeling tour in the afternoon, an $80 excursion where he saw sea turtles and brilliantly colored coral reefs. He spoke with the other people on the tour, a family from Vancouver and a young couple from Germany. He told them he was a transit manager from Chicago. He felt no need to invent a story. His life, as it was, felt like enough. He spent the next 4 days in this state of blissful disconnection. He visited the Mayan ruins at Tulum, a $50 trip that filled him with a sense of history and perspective. He ate fresh ceviche at beachside shacks, paying in cash. He had long conversations with bartenders and fellow travelers. He realized he had spent so many years trying to fit into Kalia's world of superficial glamour that he had forgotten how to simply exist in his own. On Wednesday, he decided it was time to go home. He booked a return flight for the following day. He turned his phone back on. The barrage of notifications was overwhelming. He didn't read the texts or listen to the voicemails. He simply deleted them all. Then he made one phone call, not to Kalia, but to Alana James, a partner at a prestigious downtown law firm and an old friend of his sister's. Alana, it's Reggie Wallace, he said when she answered. I need to hire you. He was back in Chicago on Thursday afternoon. The cold air was a shock after a week in the tropics, but it felt cleansing. He drove home from O'Hare, his mind clear and resolved. The Kenwood house was quiet when he entered. A half-empty wine glass sat on the coffee table, and a suitcase, not his, was by the door. Jovan had evidently come and gone. He felt nothing about it. The next morning, Friday at 9 a.m., Reggie was sitting in Alana James's office on the 45th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. Alana was a formidable black woman in her late 40s, dressed in an $8,700 Armani suit that radiated power. Her firm's billing rate was $1,200 an hour, and Reggie knew she was worth every penny. He laid out the entire story, from the ultimatum to the beach photo. He didn't embellish or editorialize. He presented the facts with the same dispassionate clarity he would use in an incident report. He handed her the folder containing the prenup. Alana read through the document, her expression unreadable. She finished, looked up at him, and a slow, appreciative smile spread across her face. Reggie, this is one of the tightest prenups I've ever seen. Your sister's friend did you a massive favor. The house is yours. The pension is yours. The waiver of alimony is unambiguous. She leaned forward. Your wife gave you an ultimatum, divorce or cancel the trip. You didn't cancel the trip. In legal terms, you accepted her offer. She initiated this, and you are simply following through. We will file a counterpetition for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences, and attach a copy of this agreement. What happens now? Reggie asked. Now, Alana said, her voice like silk-wrapped steel, we let the consequences cascade. That afternoon, a process server arrived at the Kenwood house. Kalia, who had been expecting Reggie to come crawling back, opened the door to a stranger who handed her a thick manila envelope. She opened it and saw the legal caption, In re the marriage of Reginald Wallace and Kalia Mercer. Her breath caught in her throat. He had actually done it. He had filed. She frantically tore through the documents. She saw the petition, his calm acceptance of the divorce she had threatened. And then she saw the attachment, a copy of the prenuptial agreement she had signed so casually 3 years ago. The paragraphs about the house, the pension, the waiver of support were highlighted. The first consequence hit her almost immediately. She tried to order groceries online for delivery. Her credit card was declined. She logged into the banking app. The supplementary card she had on Reggie's primary account, the one with the $10,000 limit she used for everything, had been canceled. She checked the balance of their joint account. It was nearly empty. Reggie had clearly moved his direct deposit to a new personal account. The financial umbilical cord had been severed. The cascade was just beginning. A week later, she received a formal letter from Alana James's office. It stated that under the terms of the prenup, she had 30 days to vacate the premarital property located at 49XX South Blackstone Avenue. The house was not marital property. It was his. Her world collapsed. She called her parents, who were themselves of modest means. They were shocked and disappointed. She called her friends, who offered sympathy but no solutions. She called Jovan, who was back in Pilsen preparing for another imminent breakthrough, and offered to let her crash on his couch for a bit. The offer was as flimsy as his artistic prospects. The Audi Q5, with its $950 monthly payment, was the next to go. Without access to Reggie's income, she missed a payment, then a second. A flatbed truck came and repossessed it from in front of the Kenwood house in the dead of night. The woman who had stood in a $400 silk blouse and delivered a life-altering ultimatum was now facing the stark reality of her choices. She was losing the house, the car, the financial security, the entire lifestyle she had taken for granted. Reggie hadn't fought her. He hadn't screamed or argued. He had simply let her have exactly what she asked for. And in doing so, he had taken back everything that was his. The consequences were not cruel. They were merely the logical, inevitable result of her own actions. 1 year later, the Chicago autumn was in full display. The trees along the lakefront a brilliant explosion of red and gold. The air was crisp and clean. Reggie ran along the path near 31st Street Beach, his breath pluming in the cool morning air. His long, neat locks were tied back, and his face, with its deep brown skin luminous in the early sunlight, was set in a look of peaceful concentration. He wore a simple pair of $90 Brooks running shoes and a well-worn CTA marathon t-shirt. He was not the same man he had been a year ago. The divorce had been finalized 6 months after he'd filed. It had been, as Alana James predicted, remarkably straightforward. Kalia's lawyer had made a few desperate, blustering attempts to challenge the prenup, claiming coercion and emotional distress, but the document was unassailable. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen it all, had upheld the agreement in its entirety during a brief 10-minute hearing. Reggie kept the Kenwood house, its value having appreciated to nearly $550,000 in the hot Chicago real estate market. He kept every penny of his CTA pension, now valued at well over $500,000. Kalia walked away with her personal belongings, the debt on her repossessed Audi, and a harsh education in the difference between assets and accessories. The last he'd heard, she had moved into a small, $1,800 a month one-bedroom apartment in South Shore and was working as a hostess at a restaurant in the West Loop. Jovan was, predictably, no longer in the picture. Reggie had held a quiet, cathartic estate sale in the house. He sold the $4,000 Roche Beaubois sofa, the $8,000 Persian rug, the $3,000 Restoration Hardware dining table. He sold Kalia's collection of Jovan's art to a thrift store for $50. In total, he made about $15,000 from selling the artifacts of a life that was never truly his. He used the money to repaint the entire interior of the house in calm, neutral tones. He furnished it with simple, functional pieces from West Elm, an article that suited his own taste. A comfortable leather sofa, a solid wood dining table, bookshelves filled with books on history and urban design. The house finally felt like his home. But the biggest change in Reggie's life wasn't the furniture, it was a change in purpose. He was still a rail operations manager, still excellent at his job. But the quiet satisfaction he got from a smoothly running system no longer felt like enough. He wanted to build something, not just manage it. He reached out to the HR department at the CTA and, with their blessing, started a mentorship program for young adults from underserved communities who were interested in a career in transit. He called it the Next Stop Initiative. He personally sponsored the first two apprentices, a sharp young woman named Keisha and a quiet, determined young man named Darnell, both from the Inglewood neighborhood. He paid for their technical certifications and training courses out of his own pocket, an investment of about $5,000 per apprentice. He met with them every other Saturday morning at a coffee shop in Hyde Park. He didn't just teach them about signal systems and switching protocols. He talked to them about financial literacy, about building a career, about the quiet dignity of skilled, essential work. He saw in their eager faces a reflection of his younger self, a kid from the South Side who just wanted to build a stable, meaningful life. Watching them gain confidence and skills gave him a sense of fulfillment that no five-star resort ever could. His run finished, he slowed to a walk, stretching his arms as he looked out over the vast, calm expanse of Lake Michigan. The sun was fully up now, glinting off the water. He felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced the ultimate betrayal, not with rage, but with resolve. He had refused to be a supporting character in the drama of his own life. He realized that for years he had been measuring his worth by the wrong metrics: the salary he earned, the house he owned, the beautiful wife on his arm. He had been trying to buy a sense of value that could only be earned through integrity. The ultimatum had been a gift, a terrible, painful gift that had forced him to reevaluate everything. True wealth, he now understood, isn't what you can buy, but the dignity you refuse to sell. It's not found in expensive vacations or designer clothes, but in self-respect, in purpose, and in the quiet joy of investing in others. He had lost a wife, but he had found himself. And in the end, it was the most profitable exchange of his life. The world tells us that love means sacrifice. But at what point does sacrifice become self-destruction? Reggie found his line in the sand. Where is yours? Share your story in the comments below, and let's talk about the power of choosing yourself.